Have you ever noticed that the more deeply you think, the more distant you feel from those around you? That the more you understand, the less people want to listen? This isn't just your imagination. Society has always had a complicated relationship with deep thinkers. Not because they're wrong, but because they see what others refuse to. History is full of brilliant minds who were rejected, mocked, or even punished for thinking differently. Socrates was condemned, Galileo was silenced, and Nikola Tesla died alone in a hotel room. These individuals weren't outcasts because they lacked intelligence, but because their ideas made people uncomfortable. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most brutally honest philosophers, believed intelligence was not a gift, but a curse, one that isolates those who see the world too clearly. But why does this happen? Why does society resist those who think deeply? The answer lies within human psychology. Consider this. When you meet someone who is physically strong, you don't necessarily feel weak. You may even admire their strength. When you meet someone wealthy, you might envy them, but you don't feel personally attacked. But when you encounter someone who is intellectually superior, something strange happens. Psychologists call this the mirror effect. A deep thinker doesn't just introduce new ideas, they reflect back the limitations of those around them. And people don't take kindly to that. Even if a deep thinker says nothing, their very presence can make others feel inadequate. But why does intelligence provoke this reaction more than any other trait? To understand this, let's look at how we process different forms of superiority. When someone is stronger, we see them as a leader or protector. When someone is wealthy, we may admire their success or aspire to achieve it. These qualities are external. They do not challenge our core self-perception. Intelligence, however, is different. Unlike money or physical strength, intelligence is directly tied to identity. We define ourselves by our thoughts, beliefs, and understanding of the world. When we meet someone who questions the things we take for granted, it can feel like an attack on our sense of self. Instead of admiring intelligence, many subconsciously resist it, not because deep thinkers are arrogant or dismissive, but because their presence forces others to confront their own limitations. This is why, throughout history, deep thinkers have been pushed to the fringes of society. Their insights don't just challenge ideas, they challenge egos. And humans, by nature, will do almost anything to protect their ego from discomfort. Think about your own experiences. Have you ever tried to introduce a complex idea in a casual conversation, only to be met with awkward silence? Have you ever noticed how people quickly change the topic when discussions get too deep? This is not a coincidence. It's a defense mechanism. When people encounter a deep thinker, their mind shifts into self-preservation mode. Instead of being curious, they resist. Instead of engaging, they dismiss. This is why philosophers, intellectuals, and visionaries often find themselves isolated, not because they wish to be alone, but because society pushes them away. Interestingly, studies show that in social settings, confidence is often valued more than intelligence. People are drawn to those who project certainty, even if their ideas are shallow. This explains why charismatic yet simplistic thinkers gain more influence than those who speak with nuance and depth. Throughout history, populist leaders and viral influencers have thrived by telling people what they want to hear, rather than challenging them to think critically. Meanwhile, those who question widely accepted beliefs struggle to find a broad audience. This is the paradox of intelligence. The more someone seeks truth, the more disconnected they become from the majority. Modern neuroscience supports this idea. Studies show that when people feel intellectually inferior, the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fear and threat detection, becomes highly active. In simple terms, deep thinking doesn't just intimidate people, it triggers a survival response, much like encountering a physical danger. Why does this happen? Because human brains evolved for social survival, not intellectual discovery. For most of history, being accepted by the tribe was far more important than being the smartest person in the room. Social harmony meant safety, while isolation meant vulnerability. This is why human psychology prioritizes group acceptance over the pursuit of knowledge. When a deep thinker enters a social setting, they unknowingly disrupt this balance. Their presence challenges social norms and existing ideas, triggering a defense mechanism in those around them. A study from Stanford University found that the rejection of deep thinkers is highly context-dependent. When people engage with intellectuals one-on-one, they feel less threatened. But in group settings, the threat response spikes. This is because social status becomes more important in groups. People don't just react to intelligence itself, they react to how others perceive them in comparison. If someone feels overshadowed by a deep thinker, they instinctively try to undermine or exclude them to protect their own standing. Psychologists have identified several cognitive biases that explain why intelligence often meets resistance. The Dunning-Kruger effect. People with low ability tend to overestimate their intelligence, while highly intelligent people often doubt themselves. This leads to friction, as those who know little believe they know more than they do, causing them to dismiss deeper thinkers. Status quo. Bias. The human brain prefers familiar ideas over new, complex truths. Intelligence introduces disruptive thoughts, which people naturally resist. The backfire effect. When confronted with information that contradicts their beliefs, people don't change their minds. They double down on their existing views. Deep thinkers often encounter this reaction when presenting challenging ideas. In the digital age, social media amplifies this rejection of intelligence. Algorithms prioritize engagement over depth, meaning emotionally charged content spreads faster than thoughtful discussions. Viral sound bites outperform nuanced arguments, making it even harder for deep thinkers to gain acceptance. So, what does this mean for those who think deeply? The rejection of intelligence isn't just social. It's biological, psychological, and cultural. It's built into human nature, reinforced by group dynamics, and magnified by modern technology. But this doesn't mean deep thinkers should stop sharing their ideas. It simply means they must understand the forces working against them. Because in a world that values comfort over truth, those who seek truth must be prepared to walk alone.